They were talking about surgery and some of these other interventions, and that just wasn't. I was like, there has to be more, to this. I was just starting to get concerned about like the big picture. What's 20 or 30 years going to look like this with all of that type of erosion with my esophagus. You literally make a change in your diet that's affecting all these other things that I said, and then your body's also more tolerant of the sun. The first thing I noticed when I started eating just meat and eggs was
Welcome everybody. Today we have Cory with us from New York. He's going to share with us a quick overview of what's happened to him, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty. Go ahead.
Thanks, Shawn. So I'm coming up on my 68th month with Carnivore, so about 5.5 years. I came from the keto background, keto space originally, had some success with that, hit some plateaus, came across Carnivore in 2019, tried it like most people for a month, had some immediate success, just felt a lot better. Digestion was improved, sleep quality was better. And then over the course of the, coming months, weight loss, body composition, skin issues were much improved, sun tolerance. I had GERD kind of my whole life, acid reflux. That was improved on keto, but certainly much more with Carnivore. So for me, I think I'm really fortunate that I never really had these really big health concerns that other people have had, but I just had an overall improvement in my quality of life from every metric that I can look at.
All right, awesome. How old are you now, by the way?
I'm 36.
36. You're probably not old enough to get the real, stuff that a lot of people when they start 40s and 50s when stuff starts to really fall apart for some people.
Right.
So I mean, at any point, during this process, particularly with GERD, were you ever seen by a physician? Maybe they put you on medications. A lot of times people put them on acid blockers or antacids or things like that. Any things like that?
Yeah. I originally in my mid 20s, it was every day it was impacting me. But I think it was more, I was just starting to get concerned about like the big picture, what's 20 or 30 years going to look like this with all of that type of erosion with, my esophagus. And so I was on 2.5 milligrams of, I don't know, whatever pill that they give you. And then they were talking about surgery and some of these other interventions, and that just wasn't. I was like, there has to be more, to this. So I ended up reading Wheat Belly. I think it's William Davis. Mm-hmm. And the opening chapter happened to be on GERD. And so for me, like I said, at that point, I was kind of more keto, but if I was going to have some carbohydrates, I made sure they were whole grains and like things like that. And immediately I had a lot of improvement with my symptoms. And then for the next 5 to 7 years of doing keto, but also being in my 20s and trying to make it work, it kind of crept back in. And then once I started Carnivore 100%, I mean, there's no flare-ups unless if there's an event or a party or I'm traveling or something and my diet isn't buttoned up for that day. That's the immediate impact. But that's been 100% resolved.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting with gastroesophageal reflux disease. I mean, some people feel that it is related to too much, gas produced within the gut, and that leads to pressure, which leads to, of course, that lower esophageal sphincter valve being kind of forced open, and then we get the acid, up into the esophagus, and by reducing that and I like your shirt, no grains, no plants, and I don't know if there's anything else beyond that, but from what I can see, but.
No problem.
No problem. Yeah, got it. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to think about how humans have not always eaten grains. This is a relatively novel introduction in our species, I suppose. So obviously you fixed the major issue, the gastroesophageal reflux disorder. How else has it impacted your life? I mean, in general, I mean, a lot of people just notice like sleep's improved or mental health, cognition's improved, skin. Like for me, it's kind of a pain. It's because my fingernails grow so damn fast now. Fingernails and toenails. It's like, it's like I'm growing claws or something like that because they grow so fast. But any weird things you've noticed?
Yeah, totally. It's funny you say that about the nails, right? So I have noticed that. I'm not going to say that's the top draw for me with carnivore, but I would say when I was kind of reaching my plateau in my late 20s with a pretty strict ketogenic diet. Like I'm really disciplined when it comes to diet. Um, and so at that point, I was kind of making maybe the amount of meat that I ate a little bit less. And I was kind of loading up on like the salads a little bit more. And kind of every day I would have like a big salad and like a steak at night or pork chops or whatever. And I would always notice this bloating, just this kind of GI distress, you know, gassy. Every day I would, you know, in the morning I'd have to go to the bathroom, and it was a good amount of stool, and sometimes it was once, sometimes it was twice. And the first thing I noticed when I started eating just meat and eggs was that went away. The bloating went away literally day two. Um, and so at first I thought I was just like, I just rapidly lost weight. And the weight was kind of the same. I mean, again, it was only a couple of days, but that bloating really helped me on multiple ways, right? One, it was just, I felt better, right? It's nice not having a pouch in your stomach. But like I said, you know, having to pass wind or go to the bathroom a lot, that regulated. In the beginning, I was probably going to the bathroom maybe every 2 or 3 days. And actually, immediately I had some GI distress with very loose stools, which, you know, seems like some people do in the carnivore community. Um, but then everything regulated where it was just like a, you know, everyday, very simple kind of process part of my day. So I think that was the biggest one. The sleep was something that I really noticed. I was having difficulty waking up in the morning. I've always been a pretty good sleeper, but I would wake up and I was exhausted. And I didn't really know what it was. I kind of thought that was just what happens. And the big thing that I noticed was probably a couple weeks in was that I just started waking up before my alarm. So I would wake up 20 minutes before my alarm, an hour before my alarm. And that's continued till now where, you know, my wife and I, we have 2 young kids. And I guess I can say one of the problems with carnivore is I can sleep through them crying because I feel like I'm in such a deep sleep. So, you know, that's certainly been, you know, the other aspect of it. And then body composition. I was always someone that walked. I'm about 6'1". I played college lacrosse. You know, we were weight training a lot and all that stuff. And so I was walking around 235, 240. But I always just felt heavy. And, you know, I had some ACL surgery, some meniscus stuff. And I feel like all of that weight was just kind of, pun intended, weighing on me. And so every probably 2 or 3 months, it was another 5 pounds down, another 5 pounds down, another 5 pounds down. And, you know, I have somewhat of like a background in nutrition. And so I think anyone can lose weight. I think the real power is sustaining weight loss. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm one of the things I'm most proud of about with this way of eating is being able to reduce the weight and then keep it off in a very simple, easy way. People are like, yeah, you must work out 5 or 6 times a week and things like that. And I'm like, not at all. I just make sure my diet's 100% buttoned up, and then exercise is just supplemental for me to feel good and, you know, put on some muscle mass. So I think those are the 3 main pillars in the beginning. And I've continued to experience now, you know, 5.5 years in.
So you would maybe like 210 now or something like that? Where are you?
Yeah. So I'm last week I was 192, but I want to preface, I'm also experimenting. I'm trying to get down to 12% body fat as just like an experiment. So I'm definitely 200's a nice weight for me. Like a 32 or 34 waist is nice. But I'm experimenting. I'm at like about 14% right now. So I'm trying to push it a little bit more just to kind of challenge my body. But I've heard you on podcasts too, and it's awesome being able to pull that lever whichever direction I want to go. If I want to bulk up and I want to increase muscle mass, I can do it very easily with hard work, of course, in the gym. And then the same thing with the weight loss. If I want to, you know, lose a couple, you know, pounds or, you know, some body fat. And that's been some trial and error in my experience with carnivore, but I have that ability to go up and down as much as I want. And it's very empowering.
Yeah, I'm similarly on a path to get down to about 240. I came down from about 265. I'm sitting about 250-ish right now, and I'm I'm in no hurry because I don't want to sacrifice a lot of performance as I get there. So I'm slowly, trying to maintain strength and do that. So,
Right.
um, do you, so the knee, let me ask you about the knee, ACL reconstruction, probably meniscal repair, meniscectomy or something like that. How's the knee feel these days?
Yeah, so I played college lacrosse. I played pretty much every sport growing up, and then actually in graduate school, I tore my ACL playing co-ed flag football.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, ACL tear, medial meniscus. My I had some cartilage damage, like my femoral condyle and tibial plateau, banged
Mm-hmm.
into each
Yeah.
other. So I ended up having a semitendinosus hamstring autograft
Mm-hmm.
with a meniscal. I think it was a meniscal repair. Unfortunately, tore it a year after that. I kind of came back a little bit too soon. Ended up getting a BTB
Mm-hmm.
autograft with a meniscectomy, and then and it was okay. I mean, it was fine. What's crazy? So I actually ended up tearing it a third time, and years later, and I actually didn't get surgery. So um, I'm only hesitant to say because some of the people good friends of mine that I golf with don't know that I don't have an ACL on my left knee. Um, it's fine. It really is. I remember talking with my physician, and I was kind of like, "Hey, man, this recovery is really tough. I'm not playing. I'm not running around and cutting anymore. I pretty much just golf and exercise and things like that. So it's amazing how much I really don't notice. It's not even the ACL. I mean, you know the deal, right? As being an orthopedic surgeon, like the ACL, you don't feel that. I mean, there's instability. It's the meniscus that would act up on me, especially the medial meniscus, which I'm sure you're aware, right? It's a little bit more weight bearing, and so that would be my sweet spot that I would get bitten by. But it's not an issue at all. I still run and cut and jump, and it's my left leg. So when I golf, it's my front leg. And that's not. I can't say that's just diet. I mean, I train a lot for subtalar joint mobility and hip mobility and kind of all of that stuff to make sure my body is good for it. But um, it's certainly has improved, as has any other kind of sweet spot. I would get a little tight in my contralateral hip. I've always had kind of overpronation in my feet, so my ankle joints would be a little just like eh. And those all are not an issue on a weekly, monthly, or yearly basis with this way of eating.
Can you say the carnivore diet has taken strokes off your golf game?
Yeah. Yeah, it depends on the day. I mean, to take your question seriously, I will say one of the parts, I think it's more, and it's one of the benefits that I didn't mention earlier, is kind of just like the mental resiliency and the steadiness. You hear this from a lot of people in our community, of not really experiencing the highs and the lows. So I will say that it's helped me just kind of be a little bit more level in my energy, my expectations. But I don't know, it's also just playing a lot of golf and learning that it's a better, it will always be better than you. So I've kind of succumbed to the game of golf, but I definitely have gotten better. Haven't gotten worse, that's for sure.
I had a brief period where I played a little bit when I was in the Air Force. I was getting out. I just spent my time playing golf and did that for about 3 months. And yeah, it's a frustrating sport for sure. I don't know. Maybe when I'm 90, I'll take it back up again when I'm slowing down. We'll see.
I forget what the quote is. It's or who said it, but golf is a walk ruined, right? So you spend 4.5 hours. I always walk when I play.
Mm-hmm.
So you're walking 3 miles, 4 miles, 5 miles, depending on how well you're playing. But yeah, it's this idea, and you're an athlete, right? And so you want to just get into a rhythm, and you want to constantly be running and moving. And for golf, you hit a shot and you think about it, and you walk
Yeah.
and you think about it and you hit it. It's mentally, it's really challenging, but there is reward, when you start getting a little bit better. And so, yeah,
Yeah, when you can kind of reasonably predict, hey, I think I can hit it straight and I can hit a certain distance, and
totally.
Okay, so you said family, so you got wife, kids. How are they adapting or to your carnivore diet? Are they participating at all, or what's the scenario at the house? Hey folks, it's Dr. ShawnBaker here. Hey, if you or someone you love is suffering from chronic disease and you're tired of just managing symptoms with potions, pills, and procedures, I want you to check out Revero.com. Our team of dedicated professionals is committed to tackling the root cause of your issue and finally getting you healthy. Hurry up, though. Our spaces are filling up very quickly.
Yeah, no, thanks for asking. So I have a wife, two kids. My daughter is 20 months and my son is 4.5 months. Um, when I originally started Carnivore in 2019, my wife, like most people, kind of thought it was crazy. I think I did a pretty good job of really diving into the podcast to really understand the why before the what, right? Like I knew what I wanted to do with my way of eating, but why I would be doing this. And so kind of understanding some of the basics of, plant toxicities is kind of one side of it. And then also just the bioavailability and the nourishment that you get from animal foods. And so I think I was able to kind of pitch my wife a little bit on like, hey, this actually isn't that crazy. If you boil everything down, I'm not eating any processed foods. I'm only eating single ingredient foods. I am getting all of my nutrients in their most bioavailable form. And I give her a lot of props because I think over time she was more accepting of it. And not that I needed her approval for it, but I wanted to make sure, she kind of understood why I was doing this. And then she was also seeing the results for me. I definitely don't want to talk about her with it. I mean, it's her own journey with nutrition, but I think the one thing that she can kind of understand or relate to is that she has certain food allergies. And a majority of those are from the plant kingdom, right? So if it was something where she needed kind of like a safer meal or something like that, like, cheeseburgers with no bun and eggs are pretty safe, right? So I think she kind of understood that. And then fast forward a couple years after starting it with having our children, I think the big thing that, she understood and we discussed a lot was, how fatty and how much cholesterol is in breast milk, right? And is it a coincidence that at some of the most influential times in a human development, we're giving them high fat foods, to help with their neural development and their bodily function and all of that. And so that's definitely trickled into, especially my daughter. I mean, my son is, like I said, he's 4.5 months, but my daughter, she eats a lot of animal foods. She eats a lot of animal foods. It's definitely the bulk of her. She could put down almost 4 eggs sometimes in the morning. And she has some fruit and she definitely has some vegetables but yeah, the bulk of what she eats are animal foods. And just to add another point to that, I think one of the biggest things that we've really noticed is that we have such control of her diet. My big thing was worried about the taste buds, right? Of having these like hyper palatable foods, right? You give them juices or you give them certain sweet foods, it throws off their palate. And you hear about all these kids that have difficulty eating, and we just don't experience that with our daughter. Judy Cho talks a lot about this, and so she's really, if we're at a party and she needs something sweet, we give her like whipped cream, you know what I mean? Like, or some fruit, like that's enough to give her that. So I know it's a little bit of a long answer, but this house is certainly accepting of this way of eating.
Yeah, your point about high fat, during breast milk, and there's actually a really nice paper came out a few years looking at mammalian weaning patterns, and it showed that of all the mammal species, humans, they looked at their diet predicted upon brain size and weaning time, and because humans, particularly as primates, breastfeed for such a relatively short period of time, like on average, a human being, like a wild human, would breastfeed for about 2 years. In a modern society, we don't do it. It's usually a year or less for most people. But 2 years, and then we have this enormous brain, and we compare it to like an orangutan, which will breastfeed for 8 years, and it has brain size, roughly a third of what ours is. And the reason they looked at predicting brain size based on that, and they said it's almost the only way they can account for that is access to high quality animal fat, and having a more carnivorous pattern. So it makes sense to give those kids, particularly, those first 6 years is where you see most of the brain growth. Most of it's in the very first few years, and then it's still pretty fast up until 6, and then it kind of slowly develops until we hit, I think, age 25 is when the brain is fully developed.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see
Yeah.
that,
It's awesome.
and it's good that the kids are getting that. They probably, I don't know, maybe behave better and better mood.
Listen,
You see some, yeah. Go ahead.
I don't want to judge other people's parenting and their children. I know everyone kind of has their own stories, and my wife and I are always like, "Hey, are we just really lucky here?" But they sleep really well. The thing that we're experiencing with our daughter, her teeth have all, they're still coming in, of course, but like we never had any of that teething, those kind of stories that you hear of, the nightmares of these kids, being in a lot of pain and fussy. And I know, Kevin Stock, right? You know him, the dentist. I know he's part of the Carnivore. He talks a lot about the mouth and stuff, and he talks about with. And I know Weston A. Price used to talk a lot about this with the lack of development in the jaw and the mouth with having nutrient deficiencies, and we know our daughter just doesn't have that. And is it related to the way that she eats? I'm not sure, but like she doesn't have the crazy swings in mood. She has it as a toddler, but sleeps well, relatively stable mood. Like I said, no issues with her teeth, her growth, and her all of her trajectory of her weight. Everything is great. So my wife and I feel very confident and comfortable that we're giving her all of the necessary nutrition for her to develop properly and optimally.
Yeah, it's, you wonder because you see all these sort of common childhood issues, colic, teething, and kids that are very fussy or just unconsolable, and it may be that their guts are hurting from the improper diet you're feeding them. I think that's because we start out these kids on formula and then rice cereal and then just sugary stuff from then on out. It's kind of crazy how many of us start.
Totally.
Have you experienced any major negatives with the diet up to this point?
It's a great question. Major negatives, no. Negatives, I don't know. I felt like in the beginning, and maybe this was me just kind of doing a little too much research. Like I felt like my testosterone was a little bit low, and I didn't have the quantitative numbers to show that. Um, I felt like my libido was low. Probably like 4 or 5 months in, and I don't know. That also coincides with the start of COVID and being locked down and not being outside. And so that was the only thing in the beginning. That was maybe the first hurdle that I had, where I was like, what's going on here? And I don't know. I mean, it's fine. And, I get my blood work done, and testosterone is, I know there's a couple different metrics, but mine's like in the 700s. So I'm good with that. I think the only other thing, when my wife and I were in the process of trying to conceive for our first child, it took us a little bit of time, and so I was really loading up on the fat. I was just eating really high fatty foods as much as I could, and I actually did notice some weight gain at that point. So that was kind of the first. That was probably 2.5 years in, where all of a sudden I was like, "Ooh, I'm like kind of 15 pounds, not heavier than where I was, where I started, but heavier than where I was before. It's probably in like that mid 220 range." So that was definitely, I was questioning a little bit, and I was someone who never believed in calories in, calories out. I really think it's macronutrients that you have to have buttoned up. I'm kind of from the Gary Taubes mindset of, endocrine regulation of body fat. But I did learn that, hey, you can't just eat all the time without some consequence. Something's gonna happen. So, I like I said, my weight loss kind of plateaued. I put on some weight, probably 10 or 15 pounds, and then was able to use a couple strategies to, reduce that weight. Um, you know,
I'm sure the people listening, what are those strategies? Because there's people that
ah,
struggle. Because you know what, I think this is a misconception that people feel that everyone can eat unlimited amounts of fatty meat and they'll never gain weight, or they'll never, or it'll just all fall off. And for some people that happens, but for many people it doesn't. And so, strategies you're employing to, you said get down to 12% body fat or whatever your goal is. What are you
yeah.
doing here at this point?
So I came across some of the work by the Emmerichs, right? Craig
Yeah, yeah, like
and
protein modified protein sparing fast type stuff, perhaps maybe.
so that's exactly what I did. I did protein sparing modified fasting. This was now leading up to our I actually did that before our wedding just to kind of trim up a little bit. I had a lot of success. So for listeners, that's pretty much the way I interpreted it was pretty much 2 to 3 days of eating lean, keeping the fat relatively low, right? So I was just prioritizing protein. So I would do sirloins, I would do London broil, I would do 90-10 ground beef, I would do chicken, I would do fish. And then every third day, I would have a fat reload day. So pork belly, ribeye, I mean, all the really good stuff. And I was just trimming weight, really good, composition. Um, I would say the only, and so I ended up getting out of that stall and was back down in terms of losing weight. And like we talked earlier, being able to pull that lever to continue the weight loss. The hardest part was the lean days, man. My body just really wanted the fat, and it was hard to, have the 90-10 ground beef or the London broil. I I know intermittent fasting is like in vogue now, but I did have a lot of people in this community. I naturally just fall into about a 6 to 8 hour eating window. You're not hungry in the morning. I eat at lunch, and then at dinner. The past since August of last year, so whatever, however many months that is now, 7 months, 8 months. I've been really big on OMAD, so one meal a day, um, and high fat. Right, I eat as much fat. I have no limit on how much fat I can eat. The great thing, as a lot of us know, is that it does provide satiation for me, so I'm not worried about being hungry anymore. I've had a lot of success with doing one meal a day. I feel good. It makes my day go pretty smoothly. I feel like my mind works a lot better, and then the body composition. So I would say those are the two tools that I use:
Yeah.
either protein sparing, modified fasting. For me, it was about 2 meals a day, 3 days lean, 1 day fat, or one meal a day, very high fat, which I'm doing now and still using and losing weight.
Yeah, and I think either of those can work for some people. It's interesting to see. And I've certainly, the last time I was very lean when I was, let's see, I'm 58 now, so probably I was about 53. I got down to my leanest ever in my life, and I was doing a lot of like you talked about, lean days, cycle with fat days, on about a 3 to 4 day schedule, something like that, and that worked pretty well. And yeah, I agree on the lean days, particularly by day 2, day 3, you start going like, man, I need some fat back, and then you add it back in. So it was one of those things where it definitely can work. But and again, I think sometimes, do we need to be 10% body fat? I mean, that's the question: is does it confer? I mean, it looks good. I mean, certainly you can take better pictures, but does it confer any? Does it confer any health benefits? Is it going to confer any performance benefits? And I would argue, particularly you look at like bodybuilders when they're in contest prep, they're like literally, 5 steps away from death sometimes. I mean, they can barely
Totally.
do anything. And so there's a point where you get too lean. And so it's like, what is that number? And I think the number is higher than most people would like it to be, from a performance standpoint. It's like, maybe I'm better at, 12, 14% than I would be at 8%, from an overall health perspective. And then, if you're walking around hungry all the time, it's like, that's not sustainable for very long. So it's interesting to see how it goes.
Totally.
So are you someone that talks about this online much? Do you have a online presence, or do you kind of keep quiet?
I don't have a big online presence, purposefully. I just think it can be a toxic space, and so I had Facebook. Um, I mean, I still have it, but it's not on my phone anymore. So I don't know, maybe once or twice a week I go on it. Um, that's it. But I do talk about this a lot. I've tried to tone it down a little bit, right? Because you don't want to be annoying. People that I work with, friends, family, like they know what I'm about at this point. And so it's kind of more of something that, like, if people need some help, or if they're having a health issue, or say it's a weight issue or something like that, I think they certainly put trust in me that I can at least share what I know, whether it's from my kind of keto background. Like I said, I had experience in undergraduate and graduate working with a professor who worked under or with Jeff Volek. So I was experienced with the low carb clinical side of this 15 years ago. So helping people with that, people send me their lipid panels all the time. And I'm like, listen, I am not a physician, but I will share, what I can. That's the way I like to work and communicate with people, right? Is have conversations, share my story if they're open to hearing it, and kind of doing it that way. What I do when I'm on Facebook a lot with World Carnivore Tribe, I try to answer questions a lot. I try, especially when you hear people, not like, hey, I've been on carnivore diet for a week and I'm not losing any weight, right? That it's kind of like, hey, buddy, good luck, stick with it, and it'll sort itself out. But people that have had 6 months in, 8 months in, some of their stuff hasn't improved. I try to be like very respectful. They're putting themselves out there to ask this question, and so I try to answer it how I would want someone to answer it for me, which is relatively thorough. So I don't have the bandwidth to do that with everyone, but the people that I am gonna give advice for, it's certainly genuine, and I hope it works. So that's kind of the most of it that I do right now. But yeah, the rest is kind of just in real time.
Yeah, fair enough. You've got, you wearing a shirt that says no grain, no plants, no problem. That would probably get an attention. Is that something you wear out in public much, or is that just kind of for in the house mostly?
Of course, I wear it out. Yeah, I definitely wear it out, and it's either this or like a rock T-shirt that I'm wearing. So I have a couple other carnivore shirts, but yeah, I mean, the back of my car, I have a porterhouse bumper sticker, so it's just a steak on the back of my car.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
actually, it's funny. People have come up to me. There was a woman I bumped into at a Starbucks, and she's like, "I gotta." Literally, the first thing she asked me, she was like, "Oh, do you do the carnivore diet?" And I was like, yeah. And she's like, I want to buy this for my husband. The sticker, he does that as well. So, I like to throw out some subtle,
Mhm.
hey, this is what I'm about. But I've just learned early on, even with my wife too, like you start talking about oxalates, phytates and lectins and how they're killing us. Like she's like, I don't care, and it was a good humbling kind of, hey, don't be annoying other people and other ways of eating, whether it's plant-based or Mediterranean. Like we all can be at fault of doing that. So I think it's just me learning to don't give unwarranted or unsolicited advice, but just know that if I want those people to know if they need help, I have a tool that I believe in that I think can help them.
Yeah, in fact, I was wearing a sort of carnivore, pro carnivore shirt yesterday. Out, I went into Costco to get something. I can't remember what it was, eggs or something like that. And the checker at the door was like, "Hey, I do carnivore too." So it's kind of funny. I see that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
see that.
They're out there, man. People are out there.
It's growing for sure. That's definitely for sure. As are the detractors, which are growing too. Which is, I think it's fair enough. Do you? So how's your energy? Because some people, there's critics out there that says, well, you're not going to have any energy on a carnivore diet. You need to be on a sugar diet. This is the latest. Now the latest thing is the all sugar diet or the mostly sugar diet, which is kind of interesting to see that evolve. It's kind of a fruitarian type of thing with a little bit of protein in there. But what's your energy like generally?
Yeah, energy's great, man. It's very stable. I think anyone that hangs out with me and once I kind of get going and having conversations like this, whether it's personal, whether it's work, they're always like, dude, how many cups of coffee did you have? And I do two in the morning, nothing crazy, but I feel my energy it's been great for the 5.5 years that I've been doing it. But like I mentioned earlier, it's also just the consistency, right? You hear people talk about this. It's just this kind of level consistency of energy that I have. So I don't experience the lulls. Of course, I mean, I have two young children. Sometimes we do lose some sleep, right? So yeah, there definitely are. But on a normal day, my energy is very consistent. And again, piecing in some of what I know from just like my clinical background from the research side of it, like your body, I know you share your blood work. I have my blood work. Like my body's making sugar, right? So it's making the amount of glucose that my body needs. My last fasting glucose was like high 80s. So it's like very much in the normal range. So I think once people start understanding, like I said earlier, the why before the what, and understanding why you would switch to trying to burn ketones. And I'm not someone who's using ketone strips. And I know there's debate. Are we always in ketosis? Like, I don't get lost in that. I just know my body has a fuel source that's derived from fatty acids that it probably uses most of the time. And it can also make carbohydrates, as we know, through gluconeogenesis, to kind of fill in those gaps. And so, yeah, knowing what I know from that background and how I feel, energy is like, I don't even think about it, man. I don't even think about it. It's just how I know how to live at this point, which is feeling good and not having those dips or those spikes.
Um,
100%.
all right. So let's see what else. Anything else you want to share? Anything else you want to share while we got this going on?
Yeah. So we talked about body composition, GERD, sun tolerance. It's something that's come up when I first heard about um, carnivore, and you heard people talking about sun tolerance, and I was like, "What is this?" Like, I was like, what are we talking about here?" It's amazing. I'm relatively, fair skin. I do have some Italian, Mediterranean kind of blood in my pipeline, but um, it is amazing how much more my body can tolerate the sun, and equivocally how much I crave it. As I mean, I live in New York, right? So obviously we go through some winters and some times with not a lot of sun, but I do find myself on a 45, 50-degree winter day, like trying to get some sun outside, shirt off and stuff. So that was just probably the biggest surprise, was not getting, torched if I'm in the sun for more than 40 minutes. I still got to be cool about it. Like, I want to be respectful to, sun. I kind of know when I need to, layer up and put on a long sleeve and a bucket hat. But at this point, like if my wife and I go to the beach or we're outside, I can pretty much do 2 hours. Obviously depends on the day and the time of day and all of that. So I don't want to sound too, beat my chest too much there. But generally, like an hour, 45 minutes to 2 hours, I can do with having like a good tan, feeling good, not burning. And so again, it makes me think like, how is my body doing this? How, if I was born this way and that was always the case, then okay, so be it. But you literally make a change in your diet that's affecting all these other things that I've said, and then your body's also more tolerant of the sun. It's like, I find it another one of those pieces. And I know people talk about seed oils being something that could certainly be related to sun tolerance and some of the things in vegetables, but I don't know what it is, but it's something that always amazes me every spring and summer for the 5 years that I've been doing this.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is plausible that our nutrition would affect our skin. I mean, I don't think that's a stretch at all. I mean, and we know that wrinkling and some of these other things are affected by nutrition. So why wouldn't sun tolerance be there? And I see it all the time. You're certainly among hundreds and if not thousands of people have noted there's sun tolerance. And mine is too. I mean, I still will burn in excessive sun, but
Same.
it's less than it ever was. I think that's fair to say. All right. So you've been doing this for, you said 60 some, so it's 68 months or something like that, five plus years. Any thoughts on, do you need to change in any way, shape or form? Or are you pretty happy, keep coasting where you are?
I'm in a good spot, man. I am in a good spot. I did dabble with some of the fruit stuff, right? I kind of got bit by that
Yeah.
bug. Horrible. Wasn't for me. I
Fair enough.
was my hunger. When I talk to people that I'm trying to work with, I don't mean professionally work with, but people that just want some nutritional help, and I kind of tell them, hey, listen, if you want another way of doing this, I can't help you. I have a tool here. But my pointing that is that if they're going to go keto or carnivore, I think the head of the beast is always hunger, right? Like, you're not going to suppress hunger with your psyche, right? It's not going to work, right? You have to address hunger, I feel like, from its root causes or its root issues. And so for me, with this way of eating, it's amazing how much my hunger, dissipates. And like you, again, we're big guys. Like I also get hungry and I could put down 2 pounds of meat, like no problem. But when I started dabbling with some of the fruit, I probably did it for about 2 weeks. I was just like, this is not for me. I definitely noticed my hunger skyrocketing. I just thought about food more. I woke up and was hungry, which is something that hasn't happened to me in 5 or 6 years now. So that ship has definitely sailed. I've dabbled. I've always been pretty tolerant of dairy, so I do pretty well with cheeses. I don't go crazy with cheese, especially if I'm trying to lose a couple lbs. But probably every 2 or 3 weeks, I'll just during the weekend I'll buy a pound of cheese and I'll just eat it over the course of a couple days, and then I'll go a couple more weeks and kind of do that. The only thing I might experiment with is some of the milk stuff. I don't know why, but I don't mind experimenting with that and seeing if that is something. Do I really want those 20 to 30 grams of carbohydrate and sugar in my diet? I mean, I'm eating 15 to 20 grams of carbs a week probably at this point, right? So that might be the only thing right now I kind of experiment with. But my baseline, how I eat when I'm eating healthy, when I'm eating right, is carnivore. And I'm sorry, I guess the only other thing I'll add is kind of the nose to tail versus some of the, kind of just muscle meat and kind of salt and water. I was doing nose to tail in the beginning, as I think a lot of people do. You're a little worried that you're going to be deprived of certain nutrients. I was doing it, I was having liver and I was having heart and, all that stuff. And at this point, it's pretty much steak and eggs every day. It's certainly steak every day, but I'm good, man. The simplicity of it is another draw that I just love, and don't have to, cut vegetables and cook vegetables and deal with it afterwards. So I'm in a very good groove with that, and I don't plan on wavering from it.
Yeah, I think the whole must eat organ meats type of thing was mostly designed just to sell a bunch of supplements. To be honest, I don't think they're necessary for this, but my take from the beginning. Anyway, well,
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, Cory, appreciate you being here, man. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for just getting word out. Little by little, we're making a difference. So appreciate it. Thanks for being here.
Shawn, thank you, man. Thank you everything you've done for the community, and you inspire a lot of us. And so, no, wholeheartedly thank you, and thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it. Thanks.